I need a husband.
Antonella Mora had 72 hours to get married. Her grandmother's will said, only inherits $5 million if married before 29. The problem? She was turning 29 in 3 days, and she was completely single. Solution? None, until she bumped into, literally, a gorgeous Italian guy at a cafe, and started a conversation, which turned into an impromptu date, which turned into an insane proposal. But at least she met him first, like 6 hours before, better than nothing. Hi, my name is Lena, yes, the creator of this channel. Right now on screen, I'm showing you the comments from Betty and Jackie. Thank you so much for the kind words, everyone. But before we continue, answer me this. Can marrying someone you met just a few hours ago actually work? Tell me down below and maybe your comment will appear in the next video. Chapter 1. Casual Encounter and Gradual Proposal.
We just met today.
We just met today. No, we met a long time ago.
72 hours. That was all the time I had left to get married, and I was running through the streets of Manhattan like my life depended on it, because it actually did. My grandmother's will was clear and completely insane, but $5 million was no joke, and I needed that money to open my own practice and help people who really needed it. The problem was that I was absolutely, hopelessly single, and unless a miracle happened in the next 3 days, I would lose everything. That's when I bumped into him. Literally. My body collided against something solid and warm, and the coffee in my hand flew through the air in slow motion, spilling onto the marble floor of the fanciest cafe in Midtown. Shit. I looked up to apologize, and the words died in my throat, because the man in front of me was simply too gorgeous to be real. Perfectly tailored suit, dark and intense eyes, a presence that seemed to fill all the space around him. He was holding an intact espresso in his hand, watching the disaster I'd caused with an expression somewhere between amusement and curiosity. The accent came before I could process any coherent thought, thick and Italian in a way that made my skin tingle. "It's okay," he said, and his voice was deep, controlled, the kind of voice that commanded attention without needing to shout. "You're in a hurry, aren't you?" It wasn't really a question, more an observation, and I felt exposed under that penetrating gaze that seemed to see much more than I was comfortable revealing. "Very," I managed to say, still breathless from running and now from being close to him. "Sorry, really, I wasn't looking," and the words tumbled out as I finally registered the accent completely. "You're Italian? From the accent, I mean." He smiled, and the smile completely transformed his face, making him even more dangerous to my mental sanity. "I am. Sicilian, to be exact." The way he said Sicilian did something strange to my stomach. "And are you a professional people bumper at cafes? Or is this a hobby?" I laughed, despite the chaos in my life, despite the crushing pressure of having only 3 days to solve the impossible. "Lawyer, actually, but today I'm doing a terrible job at both professions." I looked at the spilled coffee on the floor and felt a wave of guilt. "Seriously, let me buy you another coffee. It's the least I can do after almost knocking you over." "You don't have to," he replied. But he was already moving toward the counter with a natural confidence that suggested he was used to being in control of any situation. "But I can pay for yours since you lost yours." Before I could protest, he was already ordering a coffee for me, and the casual way he did it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to help a stranger who'd just bumped into him, left me completely disarmed. Minutes later, we were sitting at the same table, and I still didn't understand how this had happened. He simply invited me, and I simply accepted, as if meeting absurdly attractive Italian strangers at cafes was part of my daily routine. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the way he looked at me, like I was genuinely interesting and not just another rushed person in New York. "So," he said, resting his elbows on the table in a way that brought him a few inches closer. "Rushed lawyer, what's the reason for the desperation? Because you definitely look desperate. In a strangely charming way, I should add. I should have made up an excuse, should have deflected and kept my personal life exactly where it should be. But there was something about the way he asked, genuinely curious and without judgment, that made me want to tell him everything. "It's a long story," I began, testing the waters, "involving a completely crazy grandmother and a will that would make any lawyer lose their mind." "I have time," he replied simply, and the way he said it, calm and patient, as if nothing in the world was more important than listening to me in that moment, completely broke down my resistance. So I told him. I told him about Grandma Margaret and her absurd will, about the clause requiring marriage before my 29th birthday, about the deadline that was running out at a terrifying speed. I told him about my dream of opening my own practice to help underserved communities, about how those $5 million meant freedom and purpose, not greed. And while I talked, he watched me with those dark, intense eyes, processing every word as if he were memorizing the details. "So you need to get married in 3 days, he summarized when I finished. And there was something in his voice I couldn't identify. "And you have absolutely no prospect of a fiancé." It wasn't judgment, just a statement of fact, but it still made me feel completely pathetic. "Zero," I confirmed with a bitter sigh, "unless I find someone willing to marry a stranger for money in the next 3 days, which is basically impossible." I took a sip of the coffee he'd bought, trying to ignore the fact that he'd gotten it exactly how I liked it, even without asking. "And you need this inheritance? 5 million is a lot of money, but maybe you could get the practice other ways." He was testing, seeing how desperate I really was, and the rational part of my brain was screaming that this was strange, that acquaintances didn't ask these things, but I'd already passed the point of rationality. I could spend 10 years saving and taking out loans, or I could have it now and start making a difference immediately, I replied with brutal honesty. "My grandmother may be crazy, but she's smart too. She wants to see if I can solve impossible problems, if I have the determination she thinks lawyers need to have." I paused, looking at him with genuine curiosity. "What about you? What does a Sicilian do in New York? Business?" The hesitation was almost imperceptible, but I was a lawyer and I noticed details. "Temporary work," he said finally, and his voice was carefully neutral. "I import Italian products, mainly high-quality olive oils and wines. I have connections in Sicily that make negotiations easier." It was a perfectly reasonable explanation, but there was something about the way he delivered it that felt rehearsed. "Must be lucrative," I commented, discreetly gesturing to the suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Armani, if I'm not mistaken. Do you know fashion, or just have naturally good taste?" He seemed genuinely impressed. "You know Italian suits. I shouldn't be surprised, you being a lawyer." The smile returned, and this time it had a touch of something dangerous. "And yes, hard work brings rewards, especially when you have the right connections and know how to use them." We kept talking, and the next 2 hours passed like minutes. He was intelligent, funny in a dry, ironic way, and surprisingly easy to talk to for someone who was essentially a stranger. I discovered he was in New York temporarily, that his family in Sicily had complicated business and expectations he found suffocating, that he completely understood the pressure of inheriting responsibilities you didn't necessarily want. When he suggested lunch, I should have said no, should have gone back to my tiny apartment and kept searching for impossible solutions to my impossible problem. But the truth was, I didn't want that moment to end, didn't want to go back to the reality where I was alone and out of options. So I said yes, and let him take me to a small Italian restaurant, hidden in an alley, that I never would have found on my own. "Predictable," I teased when we sat down, trying to ignore the way my heart raced every time he looked at me with that disturbing intensity. "Italian guy takes you to an Italian restaurant. You have no creativity? The food here is better than anywhere in Manhattan," he replied with absolute confidence, and then ordered in fluent Italian to the waiter, the words flowing naturally and melodiously, and I hated to admit it was incredibly attractive to hear him speak his native language. I didn't understand absolutely anything, I confessed when the waiter left, but it definitely sounded sexy, very sexy. Actually, the words came out before I could filter them, and I felt my face heat with the embarrassment of the admission. His eyes darkened with something that made my breath catch. "You think Italian is sexy?" His voice was lower now, huskier, and he leaned forward slightly, invading my space in a way that should have made me pull back, but only made me want to get closer. "I think you're sexy," I corrected, deciding that if I'd already embarrassed myself, I might as well be honest. "The Italian is definitely a bonus, but mainly you." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet those intense eyes. "Sorry if that was too direct. I'm not normally like this with strangers. Don't apologize," he said, and his hand moved across the table, his fingers lightly brushing mine in a touch that seemed to burn my skin. "I prefer honesty. It's refreshing in a world full of games and lies." He paused, and his thumb traced a slow circle on the back of my hand. "And for the record, you're also incredibly sexy, even rushed, desperate, and spilling coffee on people." Lunch was even better than the impromptu breakfast. We talked about everything and nothing. About dreams and fears, about complicated family and impossible expectations. He told me about growing up in Sicily, about the pressure of being an only child in a family with rigid traditions, about wanting something different but not knowing exactly what. And I talked about losing my parents 5 years ago, about how my grandmother was all I had left, about how her will was crazy but also her twisted way of showing me love. That's when he brought my problem back up. 3 days, he said thoughtfully. studying my face with that intensity that was already becoming familiar. No real plan. But what if there was a solution? Like? I asked, not daring to hope as my heart pounded painfully against my ribs. Marriage of convenience, he replied calmly, as if he were suggesting something completely normal and not absolutely insane. Contractual, temporary, mutually beneficial. He paused, letting the words sink in. I marry you. I froze completely, my brain refusing to process what I'd just heard. You're suggesting that you and I, who literally met today a few hours ago, should get married? Is that what you're saying? Do you have a better solution? He countered reasonably. Look, you need a husband. I need a permanent visa. And marrying an American citizen makes the process absurdly easier. It's mutually beneficial. And you mentioned $50,000 in payment when you were venting at the cafe. I mentioned that? My voice came out shrill. God, I really was desperate. I paused, trying to process his offer rationally while my heart screamed that this was insane. Ricardo, we met a few hours ago. Literally a few hours. This is insane. It's pragmatic, he corrected, and his hand was still on mine, warm and solid and strangely comforting. Look, Nella, I understand it seems crazy, but think rationally, with your lawyer brain. You have 72 hours to find a husband. Are you going to find someone you know better than you know me now? Someone you trust more? He leaned closer, and his scent enveloped me, something expensive and masculine that made my head spin. We make a detailed contract. You're a lawyer, so you know exactly how to protect us both. We get married, pretend for 6 months to convince your grandmother, and then divorce civilly. Everyone wins. What if it goes wrong? I whispered, because the offer was too tempting. The solution was too simple for my impossible problem. Then the contract protects us, he replied with relentless logic. And Nella, during these hours we've spent together, I've noticed some things about you. You're smart, funny, incredibly beautiful, and yes, desperate in a way I find absolutely charming. The smile returned, dangerous and tempting. I like you, genuinely, so why not? 6 months isn't forever, and who knows, maybe we'll even enjoy the experience. The tears came without warning, an absurd mixture of relief and fear and hope I didn't know I still had. You're really serious? You'd do this for me? For someone you barely know. Completely serious, he confirmed, and his voice was soft but firm, but with clear conditions. 1. A detailed and legally binding contract. 2. After 6 months, a clean divorce with no complications. 3. During those 6 months we pretend convincingly as a couple in love so your grandmother believes it. And 4. He paused, and something passed through his eyes, something I couldn't identify. You don't investigate my past deeply. My family business is private and complicated, and I prefer to keep certain things separate. The last condition should have raised huge red flags, should have made me pull back and question everything. But desperation beats caution, and I needed that solution so badly I was willing to ignore the warning signs. Okay, I agreed, my voice trembling slightly. I accept your conditions, but I'm adding one of my own. Honesty within reason. No big lies about who you really are. I need that guarantee. Guilt passed quickly through his eyes. So quick I almost thought I'd imagined it. No big lies, he repeated, and I didn't realize at the time that he was already lying. That no big lies didn't mean no lies. Do we have a deal? I extended my hand across the table, formal despite the absolutely insane nature of what we were doing. Deal. You're officially my fiancé, I guess. But instead of shaking my hand formally, he pulled it, bringing me closer across the table until our faces were inches apart. Can I do something? He asked, his voice husky and low. What? I managed to whisper, hypnotized by his proximity. Seal our deal properly. And then he kissed me, soft initially, testing, giving me time to pull back if I wanted, but I didn't want to. My lips parted under his, and the kiss deepened, became something more than a simple business seal, became promise and possibility and danger wrapped up in a sensation that made my entire world tremble. The waiter chose that moment to return with our food, clearing his throat awkwardly, and we pulled apart laughing, breathing irregular and cheeks flushed. Your food is served, he announced with a knowing smile before discreetly withdrawing. That was definitely the best business deal kiss I've ever had, I commented, trying to regain some control over my racing breath. Have you had others? He asked with obvious amusement. No, first one, I admitted with a smile, but it was good. For practice, I mean. We're going to need to kiss in front of Grandma to convince her this is real. His eyes darkened again with that dangerous intensity. Then we need to practice. A lot. He leaned in again, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. I'll make sure we're perfectly convincing when the time comes. My heart completely betrayed my attempt to remain rational, racing until I was sure he could hear it. This is going to be interesting, I murmured, more to myself than to him. Very interesting, he agreed, and the smile he gave me was pure promise of things yet to come. And as we ate and talked and openly flirted. A distant part of me wondered what exactly I'd gotten myself into, what kind of deal I'd sealed with a kiss that still made my lips tingle. But I had my fiancé, I had my solution, and in 3 days, I'd be married to a completely fascinating Italian stranger who made my heart race with just one look. What could go wrong? Oh, I can think of several ways this could go wrong. But let's hope for the best for our protagonist. Chapter 2. Civil Wedding and First Lie Revealed.
You are mine now, Spring.
The courthouse was small and bureaucratic, exactly the kind of place where fairy tale wedding dreams came to die. I was standing there in my simple white dress, nothing elaborate because after all this was just a contract, just a business transaction. But my hands were shaking anyway. Nervousness consumed me in a way that didn't make sense for something that was supposedly just practical and rational. Katie was by my side as a witness, and she hadn't stopped giving me worried looks since we arrived. Finally, she leaned in and whispered in my ear, her voice loaded with genuine concern. "Girl, are you sure about this? You've known this guy for 1 day. Literally 1 day. I know," I wanted to scream. "I know this is complete and absolute madness." But instead, I took a deep breath and tried to seem more confident than I actually felt. "I know, but he's kind. And I need this marriage. And besides," my voice died when the courthouse door opened and Ricardo walked in. God, he was too gorgeous to be real. The black suit was perfectly tailored to his body, emphasizing the broad shoulders and confident posture of someone who was used to commanding any space he occupied. His presence was so dominant that the entire room seemed to shrink, all heads automatically turning to watch the man who walked toward the courthouse's makeshift altar as if he owned the place. He walked directly to me with that confidence that was already becoming familiar, that absolute certainty of someone who knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. When he got close, he took my hand with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his dark eyes, and then brought it to his lips in a gesture so old-fashioned and chivalrous that it made my heart race uncontrollably. The kiss on the back of my hand was soft, but somehow intense, loaded with promises I didn't know if I should believe. His voice came out low and husky when he spoke. "Ready, Mia Mowgli?" A shiver ran down my entire spine at the way he said those words in Italian, the thick accent doing something strange to my stomach. "Mia what?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out weaker than I'd like. The smile he gave me was dangerous and promising at the same time. "My wife," in Italian. His eyes held mine for a moment that seemed to stretch much longer than it actually lasted, and then the judge cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "Can we begin?" The judge seemed bored, as if shotgun weddings were routine for him, and maybe they were. He probably saw dozens of desperate and passionate and crazy couples pass through that courthouse every week. The vows were short and civil, nothing romantic, just the legal words necessary to make it official. The judge looked at Ricardo first, his voice monotone as he read from the document in front of him. "Ricardo Gagliardi, do you take Antonella Mura as your lawful wife?" Ricardo didn't take his eyes off mine for even a second, and the intensity in that gaze made me completely forget to breathe. The way he looked at me was so real, so genuine, as if this wasn't just a business agreement, but something much deeper and truer. "I do." My heart raced violently in my chest because that intensity was too much, was much more than I was prepared to deal with in that moment. This was just a contract, I tried to remind myself, just a mutual convenience that would end in 6 months. But the way he looked at me made everything seem frighteningly real. The judge turned to me, and suddenly the moment was there, the point of no return. "Antonella Mura, do you take Ricardo Gagliardi as your lawful husband?" My voice trembled when it came out, but the words were clear enough. "I do. I now pronounce you husband and wife." "You may kiss the bride." The judge was already closing his folder, clearly eager to move on to the next desperate couple in line. But Ricardo wasn't in any hurry at all. His hand came up, his fingers burying themselves in the nape of my neck, in a possessive and dominant way that should scare me, but only made my entire body tingle with anticipation. He pulled me close, completely eliminating any distance between us, and then kissed me. It wasn't a contract kiss. It wasn't a superficial, performative kiss to satisfy the judge. It was deep and possessive and intense in a way that made me melt completely against his body. His mouth claimed mine with absolute certainty, as if he had every right to do this, as if I already belonged to him in some fundamental way. When we finally separated, I was breathless and dizzy and completely disoriented. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Katie whispering something to herself, her eyes wide as she watched us. "This isn't pretend. Look at them." She was right, and that should terrify me. But in that moment, with my lips still tingling from the kiss and my entire body vibrating from being close to him. All I could do was follow Ricardo out of the courthouse in a kind of trance. The cold New York air hit me as soon as we left, helping to clear some of the fog in my brain. But before I could fully process what had just happened, a black SUV stopped in front of the courthouse with dark windows and an intimidating presence that seemed to scream money and power. A man quickly got out of the vehicle, Italian and wearing a suit, his expression worried as he approached us. When he spoke, his accent was even stronger than Ricardo's. "Boss, sorry I'm late. Traffic was impossible." Then his eyes fell on me, and he paused, clearly surprised. "Oh, you're the wife." Everything in me froze at that word, boss. He'd called Ricardo boss, not as a casual nickname but with a respect and deference that spoke of real hierarchy and established power. The tension in Ricardo's body was immediate and palpable beside me. "Enzo, careful." The words came out cutting, a clear warning that even I could pick up. Enzo seemed to realize his mistake because he immediately started apologizing, the words tumbling out as he tried to fix the situation. "Sorry." He turned to me with a smile too big to be natural. "Hi, Enzo Caruso, Ricardo's friend, from Sicily, childhood." He paused as if trying to make something up on the spot. "Boss is a nickname because he always bossed us around. In games, when we were kids, I was suspicious. Every lawyer instinct I had screaming that there was something wrong with that too-rehearsed explanation. But I forced a polite smile, because I didn't know what else to do in that strange situation. "Hi, Nella, the wife." The word still sounded strange in my mouth. "Nice to meet you." "The pleasure is mine," Enzo replied with exaggerated enthusiasm, but then turned to Ricardo and started speaking in Italian too fast for me to follow. I caught a few words here and there, enough to realize he was clearly agitated about something. "Capo, you got married? Without telling the family? Don Salvatore is going to—" Ricardo cut him off immediately, his voice also coming out in Italian, but the tone was cold and controlled. "Shut up. Now!" I looked between the two men, suspicion growing in my chest like a living beast. "Are you talking about me?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, the lawyer in me emerging completely. Ricardo turned to me, his face returning to that mask of calm and control. "No, business." Then he looked at Enzo with an expression that left no room for argument. "Can you leave? Now?" "Yes, of course. Sorry for the intrusion." Enzo practically ran back to the SUV and drove off at a speed that seemed excessive for someone who was just leaving a wedding. I stood there on the sidewalk, processing what had just happened, the pieces not fitting together the way they should. He called you boss and capo. I looked directly at Ricardo, searching for signs of lying. "What exactly are these Italian nicknames?" Ricardo laughed, but the sound was too carefully controlled to be genuine. "Nicknames. Like I said, Italians are dramatic, you'll see." He deflected the subject with practiced skill, taking my hand and intertwining our fingers. "Come on, let's go to our apartment. You'll like it." Our apartment. The word sent a shiver down my spine because suddenly this was too real, too permanent, much more than just a paper agreement. "Our," I repeated quietly, testing the word. "This is strange. We're married. Legally married." Ricardo stopped walking and turned to face me completely, his free hand coming up to touch my face with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low and husky and loaded with something that seemed dangerously close to truth. "Yes, we are. And Nella, I take this seriously, contract or not." His voice dropped even lower, becoming almost a possessive growl. "As long as you're my wife, I protect you. I take care of you. I respect you. Understood?" My breath failed completely in the face of his dominant presence. The way those words sounded like both promise and threat. His presence was so overwhelming that all I could do was whisper back, "Understood. Good." Then he leaned in and kissed my forehead, the gesture soft but somehow still possessive, still marking territory in a primitive way that made something in my chest tighten. "Now come on. Your new home is waiting for you." I followed him to the car that had appeared discreetly while we talked, my brain still trying to process everything that had happened in the last 2 days. I'd met a stranger at a cafe, agreed to marry him, and now I was going to an apartment that would apparently be ours for the next 6 months. In the car, I watched the New York landscape pass by the window, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. The word boss kept echoing in my head, along with the way Enzo had spoken, the almost reverent respect in his voice. That wasn't just a childhood nickname, my instincts screamed. It was something more. But then Ricardo's hand found mine on the seat between us, his fingers intertwining with comforting firmness, and I looked at the man who was now legally my husband. His eyes met mine, that familiar intensity returning, and suddenly all my doubts seemed less important than the strange and inexplicable connection that existed between us. "Are you nervous?" he asked, his voice soft but observant, always observant. "A little," I admitted, because it didn't make sense to lie when he could clearly read every emotion on my face. "This all happened so fast. Yesterday you were a stranger, and now you're my husband." The smile he gave me was small but genuine. "And you're my wife." Strangely, I don't feel even a little bit regretful about this decision. His hand squeezed mine. "What about you? Any regrets?" I should be. The rational part of my brain screamed. I should be terrified and running and annulling all of this before it was too late. But when I looked into those dark, intense eyes, when I felt the warmth of his hand in mine and remembered the way he'd kissed me at the courthouse like I actually mattered, all I could do was shake my head. "No," I replied honestly. "I'm not regretful yet. Ask me again in 6 months." His laugh was husky and real, filling the car's interior in a way that made my heart tighten strangely in my chest. "I'm going to hold you to that promise, Mia Moley." And as the car glided through the streets of Manhattan toward the apartment that was now ours, toward the life I'd agreed to live for the next 6 months, I wondered what exactly I'd gotten myself into. Who really was the man beside me? Why had Enzo called him boss with so much respect? And why, despite all the red flags and warning signs, did I still want to stay? The answers would come eventually, I knew. But in that moment, with his hand holding mine and the uncertain future unfolding ahead, all I could do was take a deep breath and accept that I'd jumped headfirst into unknown waters without checking the depth first. And a part of me, the reckless and daring part I rarely let out, was secretly excited about it. Chapter 3. Apartment is huge penthouse.
Wie ouder steigst du?
This isn't an apartment.
The building was absurd. There was no other word to describe the glass and steel skyscraper that rose in the middle of Midtown, like a monument to money and power. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, where a uniformed doorman was already approaching to open the door, and all I could do was stare open-mouthed at the impressive structure. "This is your building?" The words came out before I could filter them, loaded with surprise and a growing suspicion about exactly how much money olive oil importing really generated. Ricardo got out of the car with that natural grace of his, and extended his hand to help me, the touch sending that now familiar electric current through my skin. "Temporarily," he replied with a shrug too casual to be convincing. "Olive oil importing pays well when you know what you're doing." Before I could question further, the doorman reached us and his reaction was immediate and revealing. He practically bowed before Ricardo, the respect in his posture going far beyond what would be normal for a simple tenant. "Dawn," the word started to come out, but then the doorman's eyes met Ricardo's, and he visibly froze, quickly correcting himself. "I mean, Mr. Gagliardi, welcome back." And the lady, his gaze fell on me with poorly disguised curiosity. My entire body tensed at that. He'd almost called Ricardo Dawn, exactly like Enzo had done, and the way he corrected himself so quickly only made everything more suspicious. "He almost called you Dawn," I commented, keeping my voice low but looking directly at Ricardo as we walked toward the building entrance. His response came quick and smooth. Too practiced. He's Italian, gets the titles confused sometimes. Don is a respectful way to address someone, like sir in English. The smile he gave me was charming, but there was something in his eyes, a tension that wasn't there before. "Don't read too much into things, Nella. New York is full of dramatic Italians." I wanted to press, wanted to ask the questions that had been piling up in my head since Enzo had shown up at the courthouse, but then we entered the lobby, and the words died in my throat. The place was pure luxury. All Italian marble and crystal chandeliers and modern art on the walls that probably cost more than I made in a year. Ricardo guided me to a set of elevators at the back of the lobby, but they weren't the normal elevators where there were multiple buttons and other people waiting. It was a private elevator, with golden doors and a single button that clearly went straight to some specific place. "Private elevator?" My voice came out higher than normal, the reality of the situation starting to really hit me. "You have a private elevator?" He pressed the button as if it were the most natural thing in the world, that casual shrug returning. "The penthouse has one. It's more a matter of convenience and privacy than anything else." The doors opened smoothly, and he gestured for me to enter first. Always the gentleman even when he was clearly hiding things. The elevator rose silently, so smooth I could barely feel the movement, and my stomach tightened with nervousness that had nothing to do with the height. I was about to see where Ricardo really lived, the space that would be mine for the next 6 months, and suddenly this seemed much more real than the paper marriage at the courthouse. When the doors finally opened, my mouth literally fell open. This wasn't an apartment. It was a palace in the sky. The space stretched ahead in all directions, easily 4,000 square feet of pure luxury, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan, that literally took my breath away. The decor was elegantly Italian, all in shades of cream and gold and marble, with furniture I was certain was antique and incredibly expensive. "This is a palace," I finally managed to say, still standing in the elevator entrance because my legs refused to function properly. "You said apartment. This is a palace in the sky." His smile was genuinely amused at my reaction. "It's an apartment, just big." He approached, his hand finding the curve of my back to gently guide me inside. "Don't you like it?" "Like it?" The word came out almost like a shout, my voice echoing in the huge space. I live in 600 square feet. This is 7 times bigger. Ricardo." I turned to face him, suspicion returning with full force. "Does olive oil importing pay for this?" "Really?" Instead of answering immediately, he moved even closer, completely invading my personal space in a way that should make me pull back, but only made my entire body hyper-aware of his proximity. His hand came up, his fingers touching my chin, with a gentleness that contrasted with the dominant intensity in his dark eyes. "It does when you're very good at what you do." His voice came out low and husky. "And when you have the right connections in all the right places." I was hypnotized by his presence, by the heat radiating from his body so close, by the way those eyes seemed to see directly through all my defenses. "No," I managed to whisper, my voice coming out shamefully weak. "It's not a problem. I'm just surprised. Get used to it." His hand dropped from my chin to take mine, intertwining our fingers as he began to guide me through the space. "I like comfort, having things the way I want them. And you're my wife now, which means you deserve the same comfort." We stopped in front of a hallway that extended toward what appeared to be the private wing of the apartment. "Your room is at the end of the hall, the master suite with full closet and marble bathroom. All yours." The words registered slowly, processing what he was saying. "My room, singular, separate. And you?" I asked, hating how my voice sounded small and uncertain. "Where are you staying?" The smile he gave me was pure dangerous promise, his eyes darkening with something that made my stomach tighten in a way that had nothing to do with nervousness. "Guest room on the other side of the apartment." He paused, leaning closer until his mouth was almost touching my ear. "Unless you want to share the master bedroom with me. The bed is big enough for 2. I felt my face heat violently, the warmth spreading down my neck and chest as I pulled away from him as if I'd been burned. "No, separate rooms. That was part of the contract." The words tumbled out, too defensive, and his laughter filled the space around us. "Relax, Nella." His voice was loaded with amusement and something darker, more promising. "I respect the contract we made. Separate rooms as agreed." But then he approached again, eliminating the distance I'd created, and his voice dropped to a whisper that made every nerve in my body awaken. "But if you change your mind about that, if you decide you want company during the night, my door is always open to you." My heart raced so violently I was sure he could hear it, hammering against my ribs as if trying to escape my chest. "You're impossible," I managed to say, but my voice came out without conviction, almost like a breathless whisper. "I am," he agreed easily, and then leaned in even more, his lips lightly brushing my cheek in a kiss that was slow and deliberate, lasting long enough to make my breathing stop completely. The kiss moved dangerously close to my lips before finally pulling away. "Welcome home, Mowgli." Then he simply turned and left, walking down the hallway toward presumably his room, leaving me standing there in the middle of that absurdly luxurious apartment, breathless and dizzy and completely disoriented. My legs were shaking, my heart still racing, my lips tingling with the proximity of the kiss that almost happened. I stood there for several minutes, just trying to regain some control over my basic functions, before I could finally move. I walked slowly through the space, exploring the apartment that was now technically mine too, at least for the next 6 months. The living room was enormous, with Italian leather sofas that probably cost more than my car, and a marble fireplace that looked like it came from some Tuscan villa. The kitchen was all professional stainless steel and black granite, the kind that real chefs would use, not normal people who barely knew how to cook. There was an office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and an antique desk that screamed expensive antiquity, a formal dining room with a table that could easily seat 12 people, even a media room with a cinema screen and leather reclining chairs. I finally reached the hallway leading to the bedrooms, my feet sinking into the Persian rug decorating the floor. The first door was open, revealing what must be the guest room where Ricardo would stay. It was spacious and beautifully decorated, but clearly smaller and less opulent than what awaited me at the end of the hallway. The master suite literally left me speechless. The king-size bed dominated the space, covered with sheets that felt like Italian silk, and enough pillows to build a fort. The windows offered an unobstructed view of Central Park, the city spreading like a carpet of lights below. The closet was the size of my entire old apartment, with empty shelves and drawers waiting to be filled, and the bathroom was pure white marble with a freestanding tub that could easily fit 2 people and a shower with multiple jets that looked like it came from a luxury spa. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress absurdly comfortable even through my clothes, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. 2 days ago, I was a single, desperate lawyer with no prospect of solving my grandmother's will problem. Now I was married to a man I barely knew, living in an apartment that probably cost millions of dollars, and trying to ignore all the red flags that kept appearing. Olive oil importer, my mind whispered sarcastically. He'd said he imported olive oil and wines, that he had connections in Sicily, that he worked hard, and that's why he was successful. But people who imported olive oil didn't live in 4,000 square foot penthouses in Midtown Manhattan, didn't have doormen who almost called them Don, didn't have friends who called them boss and capo with reverent respect. Who exactly did I marry? The words came out loud, echoing in the empty room. An olive oil importer? I looked around at the absurd luxury surrounding me, the truth beginning to form in my mind, even though I didn't want to admit it, or something completely different. But even as the doubts and suspicions grew, even as the rational part of my brain screamed that I should be asking hard questions and demanding honest answers, all I could think about was the way Ricardo had kissed me at the courthouse, the way he'd promised to protect and take care of me, the way those dark eyes looked at me like I was the most important thing in his world. I lay down on the bed, sinking into the soft pillows, and closed my eyes. 6 months. I reminded myself. This was only for 6 months, just long enough to secure my inheritance and give him the visa he needed. After that, we'd go back to our separate lives, and all of this would just be a strange and surreal memory. But as I lay there in that luxurious bed, in an apartment that cost more than I'd make in a lifetime, married to a man who clearly hid huge secrets, part of me wondered if 6 months would be enough time. Enough time to discover who Ricardo really was. Enough time to understand why my heart raced every time he touched me. Enough time to protect my heart from something that was starting to seem dangerously real. The answers would come eventually, I knew. But in that moment, emotionally and physically exhausted from everything that had happened, all I could do was let sleep pull me down, surrendering to the absurd comfort of that bed and the terrifying and exciting possibilities of what the next 6 months would bring. Chapter 4. Dinner with Grandma and Lies.
We love each other.
Pile-up night had fallen over Manhattan when the car dropped us off in front of the Italian restaurant my grandmother had chosen for dinner. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the dress I'd chosen with excessive care, because this was the real test of our agreement. If my grandmother didn't believe the marriage was real, everything would crumble, and the 5 million would slip through my fingers like sand. Ricardo must have noticed my nervousness because his hand found the curve of my back, firm and comforting through the thin fabric of my dress. "Breathe, Nella," he murmured near my ear, his voice low and controlled in a way that somehow calmed me. "Your grandmother will believe it because we're going to make her believe it. Trust me." Trusting him was exactly the problem, but there was no time to question because we were already entering the restaurant. And there she was. Margaret Mora, at 90 years old, was still a force of nature, sitting at the table with the upright posture of someone who'd never bowed to anything in her life. Her eyes found us immediately, sharp and analytical in a way that made me feel like I was back to being 10 years old, being interrogated about bad grades in school. We walked to the table together, Ricardo's hand never leaving my back, his presence solid and comforting beside me. When we got close enough, I saw the way my grandmother's eyes studied Ricardo with the intensity of a general assessing potentially hostile troops. "So," she said without any preamble, her voice still strong despite her age, "this is the husband you got in 3 days." It wasn't a question. It was an observation loaded with equal parts skepticism and curiosity. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to come out steady. "Grandma, this is Ricardo Gagliardi, my husband." The word still sounded strange on my tongue, too real for something that had started as pure convenience. But Ricardo showed no nervousness or hesitation. He moved with that natural confidence of his, taking my grandmother's hand and bringing it to his lips in a gesture of pure, old-fashioned Italian charm. "Pleasure to meet you, Signora Mura. Nella has told me so much about you." The accent was more pronounced than usual, deliberately charming, and I saw the first sign of genuine interest in my grandmother's eyes. "I bet she has," she replied, but didn't pull her hand back immediately, letting him maintain the contact for a moment before finally withdrawing. Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying his face with attention that made my stomach tighten with nervousness. "You're Italian, Sicilian by the accent. What exactly do you do for work?" Riccardo seemed genuinely impressed, something I rarely saw in him. "You know regional Italian accents?" There was real respect in his voice now, not just the superficial charm from before. "I lived in Italy in the 60s, my grandmother replied, with a small smile I knew well. "Spent time in Sicily, too. I know the region, I know the culture." She paused, and her gaze became even more penetrating. "And I know Sicilian men. You're intense by nature, loyal to death to those you consider family, but also dangerous when necessary, when someone threatens what's yours." I saw tension run through Riccardo's body beside me, so subtle I probably only noticed because I was paying attention. The mask of casual charm remained in place, but something in his eyes changed, becoming more cautious and calculating. "You're very observant," he said carefully, "but I'm just a businessman, signora, importing Italian products. Olive oils, wines, that sort of thing. Nothing dangerous or dramatic." The sound my grandmother made it very clear. She didn't completely believe him, but for some reason was choosing to let it pass for now. She gestured for us to sit, and we obeyed, Riccardo pulling out my chair before sitting beside me. "And you married my granddaughter after knowing her for exactly how long? Was it love at first sight?" The sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt my face heat with embarrassment and nervousness. This was the hard part, making her believe this was real when she was clearly already suspicious. Before Riccardo could answer, I rushed to intervene, trying to control the damage. "Grandma, we met and connected immediately. It was something I'd never felt before." I looked at Riccardo, seeking support, and found those dark eyes already fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. And we decided quickly, yes, but that doesn't make it less real. Sometimes you just know when you find the right person. Riccardo's hand found mine on top of the table, his fingers intertwining with possessive firmness that sent that now familiar shiver down my spine. When he spoke, his voice was loaded with an intensity that sounded dangerously real. "Very real, signora. Your granddaughter is an extraordinary woman, smart in a way that constantly challenges me, breathtakingly beautiful, strong enough to face any adversity." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "I was very lucky to find her when I did." My grandmother watched everything with those sharp eyes that missed nothing, studying the way our hands intertwined, the way Riccardo looked at me, the way my body unconsciously leaned toward his. Finally, she asked the question I'd been dreading since we sat down. "Do you love her?" The words were direct and without beating around the bush, typical of her, cutting through all the superficial conversation straight to the heart of the matter. Riccardo went still beside me, and I felt the moment stretch as he processed the question. The answer should be no, or maybe something vague about still getting to know each other, something safe that wouldn't emotionally compromise either of us. But when he finally spoke, looking directly into my eyes instead of my grandmother's, the words that came out weren't the ones we'd rehearsed or planned. "I'm starting to," he said, his voice husky and loaded with a truth that made my heart race violently in my chest. Faster than I expected or planned, but yes, I'm starting to love her. The shock must have been visible on my face because that definitely wasn't part of the script. We hadn't talked about declarations of love, about making this seem so intensely real. This was supposed to be a performance, a well-rehearsed lie to convince my grandmother, but the way he looked at me in that moment had nothing fake about it. My grandmother saw everything, of course, because she always saw everything. A small, knowing smile touched her lips, and there was something in her eyes that seemed like satisfaction, and maybe even approval. "Good," she said finally, her voice softening slightly. "Because if you hurt her, young man, you need to know that I also have my own connections. Understood?" The threat was clear, as crystal despite being delivered in an almost casual tone, and I saw Riccardo process the words with genuine respect. He nodded once, firm and serious. "Understood perfectly, signora, but I can promise I won't hurt her. I intend to protect and care for her as she deserves." The dinner that followed was surprisingly pleasant, considering how it had started. My grandmother asked questions about how we met, and Riccardo wove the story with convincing details mixed with enough truths to make it all believable. She asked about his plans in New York, and he talked about expanding the import business while I watched the half-truths flow so smoothly from his lips. At the end of the meal, my grandmother put her fork aside and looked at me with an expression I couldn't completely decipher. Approved. For now, at least. The word sent a wave of relief so strong through me it almost made me dizzy. "The inheritance is yours, Antonella. You accomplished the impossible." "Thank you, Grandma," I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly with emotion. "This means everything to me." "I know, dear." She reached her hand across the table to squeeze mine. "That's why I created the test. I needed to know if you had the determination necessary to face impossible challenges." Her eyes moved to Riccardo briefly. "And apparently you're luckier than I imagined, too." When we finally left the restaurant, the New York night air was cold against my heated skin. skin. Ricardo guided me away from the entrance, his hand finding mine again, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We walked a few blocks in silence before I finally found the courage to speak. "You said you're starting to love me." The words came out softer than I intended, almost lost in the noise of the city around us. That wasn't part of the script we agreed on. Ricardo stopped walking, turning to face me completely under the dim light of a street lamp. His hand came up to touch my face with a gentleness that contradicted the intensity burning in his dark eyes. "It wasn't," he admitted, his voice low and husky. "Nella, this marriage started as a simple contract, a mutually beneficial business transaction. But you," he paused, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw with a reverence that made my heart ache painfully. "You make me feel things I haven't felt in years, things I thought were dead inside me, and that's dangerous. For me, for what I am." The words sent a shiver of apprehension down my spine. "For what you are. What exactly does that mean, Ricardo?" My voice came out firmer now, the lawyer in me emerging to demand answers. "What aren't you telling me?" I saw conflict pass through his eyes, the internal war between revealing the truth and keeping the secrets he clearly carried. For a moment I thought he was finally going to tell me everything, break down the barriers and be honest with me. But then the mask returned, that carefully controlled expression he wore when he wanted to hide something. "Nothing," he said finally, but the word sounded false even to my ears, desperate to believe. "Forget what I said. They're just empty words from a man who's more affected by you than he should be." Before I could protest or ask more questions, he pulled me close, eliminating all distance between our bodies. His mouth captured mine in a kiss that was anything but empty, loaded with a desperate intensity that stole all the air from my lungs. It wasn't the calculated kiss from the courthouse or the provocative touch at the penthouse. It was something deeper and more frightening, as if he were trying to tell me through the kiss everything he refused to say in words. I responded without thinking, my arms rising to wrap around his neck as I surrendered completely to the kiss. The world around us disappeared, reducing itself to just the two of us, and the electric connection that seemed to exist whenever we touched. When we finally separated, we were both breathing heavily, our hearts beating in accelerated synchrony. "Nella," he whispered against my lips, his voice broken in a way I'd never heard before. "You're destroying me from the inside out, and the worst part is I don't care." I didn't have a chance to respond because at that moment my phone rang, breaking the moment. I answered, distracted, still dizzy from the kiss, and Katie's voice filled my ear with concern. "Nella, are you okay? How was dinner?" "It was good," I managed to reply, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. She approved. The inheritance is mine. But as I talked to Katie and Ricardo guided me back to the car that had appeared discreetly, my mind was somewhere else entirely. I was thinking about the way he'd kissed me, about the truth I'd felt in his words about starting to love me, about the secrets he clearly still hid. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know in that moment, was that far away somewhere in the city, Enzo was on the phone with someone, his voice tense and worried as he reported what he'd observed during dinner. "The boss is really in love. This is a serious problem. And there's more. Julia found out about the wedding. She's coming to New York." His words sealed a fate that hadn't yet arrived, foreshadowing the storm that was forming on the horizon. But in that moment, in the car heading back to the penthouse with Ricardo's hand holding mine and the taste of him still on my lips, all I could think was that maybe this marriage of convenience was becoming something dangerously real, and I didn't know if I should be terrified or excited about that possibility. Chapter 5. Julia shows up in Italian chaos.
You did this!
No, I didn't! You're wrong!
Stop it, both of you!
A week had passed since dinner with my grandmother. A week of living in that absurd penthouse and trying to establish some kind of routine with a husband I barely knew. I was working in the apartment's office that afternoon, reviewing contracts for the practice I could finally open now that the inheritance was secured, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite and brief ring, but insistent and aggressive, as if whoever was on the other side had decided to simply hold the button down without stopping. Irritation ran through my body as I got up from the desk and walked to the door. Ricardo had gone out to handle some mysterious business he refused to detail, so I was alone in the apartment. When I opened the door, completely unprepared for what awaited me, I found myself face to face with an absolutely beautiful and absolutely furious Italian woman. She was all fire and fury, with dark hair cascading over her shoulders, and eyes that burned with a rage so intense I almost took a step back instinctively. Before I could process any coherent thought or even ask who she was, the woman started screaming in Italian with volume and intensity that probably alerted half the floor. "Dove Riccardo? Lui è mio." Tu non sei niente. The words came out like machine gun fire, loaded with venom and possessiveness, and all I could do was stare at her completely lost, because I didn't understand a single word of what was being said. Sorry, I managed to say when she finally paused to breathe, my voice sounding pathetic even to my own ears. I don't speak Italian. Who exactly are you? The switch to English was immediate, though the accent was so thick it made some words almost incomprehensible. I am Giulia Ferretti, Riccardo's fiancée, his real woman. Each word was punctuated with dramatic hand gestures. And you? Who the hell are you? My stomach sank at those words because fiancé wasn't something Riccardo had mentioned at any point during our conversations. I managed to say, my voice failing slightly. I'm Riccardo's wife, legally married to him. The laugh that came out of her was hysterical and shrill, sounding completely unbalanced in a way that made all my self-preservation instincts scream alert. Lies. Complete lies. She gestured violently with her hands. Riccardo would never marry. He is Don. He has rules about these things. Family traditions he must follow. The word Don made my entire body freeze because this was the third time I'd heard someone use that specific title to refer to my husband. Don? I repeated slowly, trying to understand. Like boss? Leader of some kind? But before Giulia could answer, Riccardo's voice cut through the tension like a sharp blade. Giulia. The name came out loaded with a fury so cold and controlled it made even my skin crawl, and I wasn't even the target. What exactly are you doing here? I turned to see Riccardo standing at the entrance of the elevator hallway, and the expression on his face was something I'd never seen before. There was no charm or amusement or the seductive intensity I was used to. There was only pure and barely contained fury. His eyes darkened to almost black, and his jaw so tense the muscles stood out visibly. Giulia showed no fear or hesitation in the face of that fury. On the contrary, she ran to him as if she had every right to do so, her hands grabbing his arms while rapid Italian words began to pour from her mouth again. I found out. You got married? To some random American? This is betrayal against the family. Your whole family is furious and— Riccardo interrupted her, grabbing her wrists and removing her hands from his body with controlled but firm force. The words that came out in Italian were cutting and cold. You are not my fiancé. Never were. We broke up 2 years ago. But you said— Giulia started to protest, her voice rising in volume again. I said I didn't want you. Riccardo's voice cut through her words like a blade, multiple times. In every possible way. You're the one who refuses to accept reality. I was standing there watching everything unfold like a helpless spectator in a foreign film, not understanding half of what was being said, but feeling the tension and anger emanating from both in almost palpable waves. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Can someone translate? Please. Riccardo turned to me, and the expression on his face softened marginally when our eyes met. She's my ex, a completely crazy ex who won't accept that the relationship ended years ago. Then he turned back to Giulia, returning to Italian with a voice that promised serious consequences. Get out of here, now, or I'll call security and you'll be forcibly removed. But Giulia apparently wasn't ready to give up yet. She turned to me, her eyes burning with a hatred so visceral I took an involuntary step back. The words that came out of her in English were deliberate and clear, meant to hurt me, and reveal what she clearly thought I didn't know. You don't know who he really is. She practically spat the words. Riccardo Gagliardi, Don of the Gagliardi family, head of the Sicilian Mafia. He lied to you about everything. The world seemed to stop completely in that moment. Mafia. The word echoed in my head like an alarm bell, connecting all the puzzle pieces I'd been trying to ignore. The absurdly expensive apartment, people calling him Don and boss, the reverent respect from employees, the way he moved with natural authority and expectation of obedience. Everything suddenly made sense in a terrifying and clear way. Mafia! The word came out as a weak whisper because my throat seemed to have forgotten how to produce normal sounds. Giulia, shut up! The fury in Riccardo's voice was now completely directed at her, dangerous in a way that finally seemed to penetrate through her anger. But she didn't stop, the words continuing to pour out as if she needed to make sure I knew the whole horrible truth. She deserves to know the truth. You're a criminal, dangerous. You kill people, control territories. Your family, Giulia. Riccardo's voice dropped to something cold and deadly that made the air in the room seem to freeze. You have 10 seconds to leave this apartment, or I personally make you leave, and I won't be gentle when I do. For the first time since she'd appeared, I saw real fear pass through Giulia's eyes. She looked at Riccardo, really looked at the expression on his face, and something she saw there made her physically retreat. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, almost broken. You choose her. Choose this random American over your family, over me. Yes. Riccardo's word was absolute and without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. Now leave before I completely lose my patience. Julia finally left, practically running to the elevator while tears of rage and humiliation ran down her face. The doors closed behind her, with a final sound that seemed to echo in the sudden and heavy silence she left behind. The silence stretched between us for long moments, while I processed everything that had just happened, all the revelations Julia had thrown in my face. Ricardo stood there a few meters away, waiting, watching my reaction with a carefully controlled expression that hid whatever he was feeling. Mafia, I finally repeated, the word gaining weight and reality as it left my lips. She said Mafia, that you're the head of the Mafia. Nella, Ricardo began, taking a step toward me, but I raised my hand to stop him because I couldn't handle his proximity in that moment, not when my entire world was crumbling. Mafia, Ricardo, my voice rose, all the anger and fear and betrayal I'd been holding finally exploding. You're the head of the Sicilian Mafia? That's what you really do? He sighed, and the sound was loaded with exhaustion and resignation. Yes. The admission was simple and direct, without excuses or attempts to soften the truth. I'm Don of the Gagliardi family. My legs trembled under me, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. And you didn't tell me. You lied directly to me. Tears began to burn behind my eyes. No big lies, you said. We agreed on honesty. And this is the biggest lie possible. I was going to tell you, Ricardo protested, finally closing the distance between us despite my earlier attempt to keep him away. But I didn't want to scare you right at the beginning, not when you were still deciding if you trusted me. Scare? I practically screamed the words. I married you, legally tied myself to you, and you're a criminal. A mobster. You probably kill people. Something passed through his eyes, something dark and dangerous that confirmed my worst suspicions. But when he spoke, his voice was soft and almost vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. I am Don. Yes, Gagliardi family of Sicily. I controlled territories, businesses, people. He moved even closer, dominant, but somehow also vulnerable. But Nella, I didn't hurt you. I'll never hurt you. He paused, and I saw the internal struggle reflected in his dark eyes. You're the only pure thing in my life, and I protect you. I'll always protect you. The tears finally fell, running hot down my cheeks. How can I trust you? Everything was a lie from the beginning. Everything. Not everything. His hands grabbed my shoulders, firm but careful. The feelings are real. When I said I'm falling in love with you, that was true. The way I feel when I'm near you. Real! His voice broke slightly, showing raw emotion. Nella, I understand if you want to annul everything. Divorce immediately. Run away and never look back. But please. The vulnerability in his voice was something I never expected to hear. Give me a chance to explain everything, to show you who I really am. I looked at the man in front of me, searching for signs of lies or manipulation, but all I saw was genuine vulnerability and something that seemed dangerously close to desperation. Do you love me? I whispered, needing to know if at least that was true. Really love me? Yes. The answer was immediate and fierce. More than I should. More than is safe for either of us. But yes. I love you. Shit. The word came out as an exhausted sigh, because what else could I say in the face of all this? I wiped the tears with the back of my hand, trying to regain some control over my spiraling emotions. Okay? You explain. Everything. Now. Every detail. Every lie. Every truth. I looked directly into his eyes. And then I decide if I stay or if I leave, and never look back. Fair. He took my hand, intertwining our fingers, and guided me to the couch. Sit. This is going to take a while. And as we sat together on that luxurious couch, with all the truth finally about to come to light, I wondered if I was ready to hear who my husband really was, if I was ready to understand the dangerous world I'd stumbled into unknowingly, and most importantly, if I'd be able to accept everything and still stay. The answers would come in the next few hours. But in that moment, all I could do was hold his hand and prepare to have my world turned completely upside down. Imagine the pit in her stomach waiting for answers. We've all been there. Chapter 6, Full Confession.
Tell me everything.
Where do I even begin?
The couch was too soft for the weight of the conversation we were about to have. I sat in the corner, pulling my legs up and hugging my knees against my chest in a defensive posture I couldn't avoid. Ricardo sat beside me, keeping a respectful distance, but still close enough that I could feel the heat emanating from his body. He took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep and dangerous waters, and then began to speak. My father was Don before me. His voice came out low but firm, loaded with memories I could see reflected in his dark eyes. He died 3 years ago under circumstances I won't detail now because they're not relevant to what you need to know. When he died, I inherited everything. The title, the responsibilities, the weight of the entire Gagliardi family on my shoulders. I stayed quiet, letting him continue without interruption, because I knew that if I interrupted him now, he might lose the courage to tell me everything. He was looking at his own hands as he spoke, as if he couldn't face me while revealing the complete truth. The Gagliardi family controls large parts of Sicily, ports, legitimate businesses, territories that generations before me built through blood and power. He paused, his fingers intertwining and untwining nervously. I came to New York because I was running from a war with a rival family called Benedetti. They wanted to kill me, take over our territories, destroy everything my father built. He finally looked at me, and the raw honesty in his eyes hit me like a punch. The olive oil and wine importing is real, Nilla, but it's just a front, a small part of what I really do. The question came out before I could stop myself, the need to know the complete truth overcoming the fear of what the answer might be. Do you kill people? My voice was surprisingly steady considering my stomach was churning, and my heart was beating so hard, it seemed to want to escape from my chest. Ricardo didn't look away, didn't try to soften the truth, or spare me from the brutal reality of his world. I protect my family. Sometimes that means doing things I don't want to do, making decisions that keep me awake at night. The honesty in his voice was painful to hear. Yes, sometimes I kill, but never innocents, never without reason, only when there's no other choice, when it's them or my family. He started to reach for my hand but stopped halfway, as if he wasn't sure he still had the right to touch me. I would completely understand if you wanted to run away right now and never look back, but there were more questions burning in my throat, more puzzle pieces that needed to fit before I could process everything and make a decision. What about Julia? The words came out sharper than I intended. Who exactly is she to you? Ex from 2 years ago? Ricardo answered immediately, as if he'd expected the question. An arrangement between families that my father negotiated before he died. I tried to make it work because it was my obligation, my duty to the family. The bitterness in his voice was palpable, but I didn't love her. I never felt anything but obligation. So I ended it 2 years ago, made it very clear there was no future between us. She just refused to accept reality. She's obsessive, but she doesn't represent a real threat. What about Enzo? I continued, the lawyer in me emerging completely now, cataloging information and building the complete picture. Who exactly is he? My capo, right-hand man since we were kids in Sicily. A small smile touched Ricardo's lips at that. Loyal to death, protects me with his own life if necessary. Kind of clumsy and dramatic sometimes, but extremely competent at what he does. He coordinates my security, manages operations when I'm not present. He's the person I trust most in the entire world besides you. I processed everything he'd told me, each revelation fitting with the observations I'd made during the past week. The luxurious apartment, the respect from employees, the way he moved with natural authority. Everything made sense now in a terrifying and enlightening way at the same time. You lied, I began slowly, choosing each word carefully. About almost everything. Who you are, what you do, the dangers surrounding me just by being at your side. The tears began to burn again, but I forced them back because I needed to finish that thought. But you also protected me from the first moment, respected me in ways most men wouldn't, treated me like I mattered, like I was precious. I paused, breathing deeply while trying to understand my own confused feelings. And shit, Ricardo, I feel something for you. Something real and scary and completely irrational. I saw hope ignite in his eyes, that vulnerability returning to the surface. So you're staying? I should run, I admitted, the tears finally escaping despite my efforts to contain them. Any sane person would run as fast as possible from a Mafia boss who lied about his identity. I wiped the tears angrily, frustrated with myself for not being able to simply get up and leave. But I can't. I can't just erase what I feel. Pretend this week didn't happen. Forget the way you make me feel. The relief that passed over Ricardo's face was so deep, it almost hurt to see, but I raised my hand before he could get closer or touch me, because there were still things that needed to be said, conditions that needed to be established. But I'm staying with conditions, I said firmly, the lawyer in me taking control to establish the terms. 1. No more lies. None. About anything. If I ask something, you answer with complete honesty, or you tell me you can't answer, but you don't lie. I waited until he nodded before continuing. 2. You teach me to defend myself. Your world is dangerous, and if I'm going to be in it, I need to know how to fight. I need to be able to protect myself when you're not around. I completely agree, he said immediately, and I could see he was serious. Enzo can start training you tomorrow if you want. 3. I continued, holding his gaze. Emotional honesty. Always. If you're angry, scared, worried, anything, you tell me. Don't hide feelings behind masks and control. I need to know what you're feeling if this is going to work somehow. Ricardo didn't respond with words. Instead, he closed the distance between us in one fluid movement, his hands tangling in my hair as he pulled me into a kiss that was completely different from all the others we'd shared. There was no calculated seduction or performance for an audience. It was pure, raw emotion, relief and gratitude, and something deeper that neither of us was ready to name yet. I responded with the same desperate intensity, my arms wrapping around his neck as I surrendered completely to the kiss. It was as if we were sealing a new agreement, deeper and more real than the paper contract we'd signed at the courthouse. When we finally separated, we were both breathing heavily, our foreheads pressed together as we tried to regain some control. "Everything," he whispered against my lips, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I promise everything you asked for. No lies, complete training, total emotional honesty." His hands caressed my face with reverence. "And Nella, thank you for not running away, for giving me this chance to prove I can be the man you deserve." A wet laugh escaped me, sounding half hysterical even to my own ears. I must be completely crazy. Any sane person would be running for the hills right now. The smile he gave me was genuine and had that dangerous edge that always made my stomach tighten. Two of us then. Because I must also be crazy for risking everything by getting emotionally involved with you when I know how dangerous that makes us both. "My husband is a mafia boss," I said out loud, testing the words and trying to believe that was my reality now. The laugh that came out was half sob, half genuine amusement at the absurdity of it all. "My life is completely insane, and mine too," he agreed, pulling me closer until I was practically in his lap, wrapped in his strong arms. "But maybe we can be insane together, face all the madness as a team instead of alone." The word echoed between us, loaded with promise and possibility. "Together," I repeated softly, letting the weight of that word sink in. It was no longer just a 6-month contract, no longer convenient and temporary. It was something real and scary and completely unpredictable. "Together," he confirmed, sealing the promise with another kiss. Softer this time, but no less intense. "You and me against whatever comes, Nella. That's my promise to you." And as we sat together on that couch, intertwined and finally honest with each other, for the first time since all this madness began, I felt something like hope. It wasn't the guaranteed happy ending of fairy tales, and there would probably be more storms and revelations and dangers ahead, but we had truth now, and we had each other, and maybe that was enough to start. The path ahead would be dangerous and uncertain, full of challenges I could barely imagine. But as Ricardo held my hand and looked at me as if I were the most precious thing in his world, I decided I was willing to walk that path, even if it was madness, even if it ended in tears. Because sometimes love, real and deep and true, is worth the risk. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to risk everything. I think finding out I'm married to a mafia boss would be the biggest shock of my life. There's no way not to understand Nella's reaction. Chapter 7. Enzo Subplot.
Good. Show me.
I can defend myself.
Prove it.
And training. A few days had passed since Ricardo's full confession, a few days of learning to navigate this new reality where my husband was literally a mafia boss. I was in the kitchen having breakfast when I heard the doorbell ring, followed by Enzo's familiar voice echoing through the apartment as Ricardo let him in. When I appeared in the living room, I found Enzo standing there looking strangely nervous for someone who was supposedly an experienced mobster. Ricardo was beside him with an amused expression on his face, clearly waiting to see how this interaction would unfold. Enzo looked at me, and then back at Ricardo before finally speaking, the words tumbling out in English laden with an accent even stronger than usual. "The boss asked me to teach you self-defense." His hands gestured dramatically as he spoke, nervousness palpable in every movement. "I'm the teacher now, apparently. I've never trained anyone before, but the boss trusts me, so here I am," and he stopped to breathe, wiping his palms on his pants as if they were sweaty. I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face at his clear anxiety. "You look absolutely terrified, Enzo. It's just self-defense training, not brain surgery. You don't understand." Enzo practically groaned the words, looking nervously at Ricardo as if expecting to be attacked at any moment. "The boss told me, and I quote, 'If she gets hurt during training, I'll hurt you the same way. So there's a lot of pressure here. You're his wife and I can't let anything bad happen to you or I'm going to die.'" Ricardo chuckled softly from across the room, clearly enjoying Enzo's discomfort. "Maybe I exaggerated the threat a little," he admitted with a casual shrug. "But the point stands. Take good care of her, Enzo." I walked over to Enzo and placed a comforting hand on his arm, feeling the tense muscles under his shirt. "Relax, Enzo. I don't bite. I promise. And if I get hurt, it'll be my fault for being uncoordinated, not yours for being a bad teacher." I gave him my most reassuring smile. "Let's just do our best and learn together, okay?" The relief that passed over Enzo's face was comical to see. "Okay, yes, we can do this. You seem reasonable and nice, so maybe I won't die today." He took a deep breath as if preparing for battle. "The penthouse's private gym is set up for training. You should change into something comfortable that allows movement." 15 minutes later, I was wearing leggings and a sports t-shirt, following Enzo to a part of the apartment I hadn't fully explored yet. The gym was, Like everything else in this place, absurdly luxurious and well-equipped. There was professional weight training equipment, treadmills, an open area with mats on the floor clearly intended for martial arts and combat training. Enzo guided me to the mats, his movements becoming more confident now that he was on familiar territory. Okay, let's start with the basics. Posture, balance, how to stand firm when someone pushes you. He demonstrated the correct position, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, center of gravity low. Try to copy what I'm doing. The next few hours were intense and surprisingly rewarding. Enzo was a better teacher than he himself believed, patient when I messed up, and generous with praise when I got it right. He taught me basic punches, showing the correct way to make a fist so I wouldn't break my own thumb, how to put the weight of my entire body behind the strike for maximum impact. He taught me kicks, starting with low kicks to the shins and knees, before gradually moving up to higher and more complex kicks. Now let's practice a real punch, Enzo said, holding training pads in his hands. Don't hold back. Give me everything you've got. I can take it, I promise. I took a deep breath, positioned my body the way he'd taught me, and punched the pads with all the strength I could muster. The impact reverberated through my arm in a satisfying way, and I heard Enzo make a surprise sound. I looked up in time to see his eyes wide with genuine shock. "Madonna!" he exclaimed, lowering the pads and looking at me with something like respect. "You're strong, very strong. Where were you hiding all this strength?" Before I could answer, I heard slow clapping coming from the gym entrance. I turned to see Ricardo leaning against the doorframe, his dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my entire body heat up, despite the sweat from exercise. I didn't know how long he'd been standing there watching, but the expression on his face suggested he'd seen enough to be impressed. "My wife is a warrior," he said, his voice husky and loaded with something that seemed dangerously close to possessive pride. He pushed away from the door and walked toward the mats where Enzo and I were standing, each step controlled and predatory in a way that made my heart race. "I have to be," I replied, trying to control my breathing that had very little to do with physical exercise and everything to do with the way Ricardo was looking at me. "Your world is crazy and dangerous. I can't just depend on you to protect me all the time." The smile he gave me was pure approval and desire mixed in a devastating combination, and you fit into it perfectly. Then he simply pulled me against his body, apparently not caring that I was sweaty and probably didn't smell very good after hours of intense training. His mouth captured mine in a possessive and deep kiss that stole the rest of the air from my lungs. I responded without thinking, my arms wrapping around his neck as I surrendered completely to the kiss. It was as if he was marking territory, showing Enzo and the whole world that I was his, and the primitive part of me I rarely let out loved it. "Okay, I'm just gonna take a walk, or something," I heard Enzo mutter uncomfortably somewhere behind us, clearly embarrassed to be witnessing the intimate moment. But neither of us pulled away until we heard his footsteps retreating and the gym door closing softly. When we finally separated, we were both breathing heavily, and Ricardo rested his forehead against mine for a moment. "You have no idea how sexy it is to see you fighting, all sweaty and fierce." His voice was hoarse in a way that sent shivers down my spine. I was having extremely inappropriate thoughts while watching the training. A breathless laugh escaped me. "Inappropriate how?" "Like pulling you over here and showing you exactly how much I appreciate a strong woman who can defend herself." His eyes darkened with promise. But that would have traumatized poor Enzo, so I restrained myself with remarkable difficulty. Later that afternoon, I was showering to wash off the sweat from training when I heard the doorbell ring again. I finished quickly, put on clean clothes, and went to the living room to find out who it was this time. To my surprise, I found Katie standing there chatting animatedly with Enzo, who seemed to have returned at some point while I was in the shower. "Nella!" Katie exclaimed when she saw me, running over to hug me. "I came to check how you are. It's been an intense week since you married Mr. Mafia here." She gestured vaguely in the direction of where Ricardo was sitting, reading something on his tablet, apparently undisturbed by the nickname. "I'm fine," I assured her, returning the hug. "Better than expected, actually. It's all very crazy, but we're making it work." That's when I noticed Enzo looking at Katie, with an expression that could only be described as complete enchantment. He approached her with hesitant steps, his hands gesturing dramatically as he always did when he was nervous or excited. "You're Nella's friend, the other lawyer." The words tumbled out as he practically bounced with excitement. "You're very beautiful too, and smart because lawyers are always smart." Katie turned to look at him, one eyebrow raised in amused skepticism. "And you're the Mafia, right? The one who trains Nella?" The suspicion was clear in her voice, but there was also a touch of curiosity I knew well from my friend. "Yes, but I'm nice," Enzo immediately protested, his hands still moving in broad gestures. "In the Mafia, I mean. I'm like the cute Mafia. It exists. I'm proof. The laugh that came out of Katie was genuine and surprised. There's no such thing as cute mafia, Enzo. That's an oxymoron. But I exist, Enzo insisted dramatically, placing a hand on his chest as if deeply wounded by her disbelief. I'm loyal and protective, and yes, sometimes I do dangerous things, but I'm also kind, and I like dogs and children, and I do charity work. Katie was laughing openly now, shaking her head with clear amusement. You're ridiculous, you know that? Enzo's eyes lit up as if that was the greatest compliment he'd ever received. But charming too? Maybe a little. The hope in his voice was so obvious it almost hurt to see. There was a pause while Katie studied him, and I could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Finally, she gave a small smile, the kind that meant she was intrigued despite herself. Maybe a little. Yes. Enzo practically jumped for joy, fists in the air in celebration as if he'd just won the lottery. I win! This counts as a victory. You haven't won anything yet, Katie corrected him, but she was smiling as she said it. But maybe, and I'm saying maybe, we could get coffee together, tomorrow. If Enzo was excited before, now he looked ready to explode with pure happiness. Yes, coffee. Tomorrow, what time? Where? I know the best coffee places in all of New York. Or you choose. Whatever you want. I agree with everything. I watched the whole interaction with a growing smile on my face, happy to see Katie potentially interested in someone, and even happier that someone was sweet. Loyal Enzo. Across the room, Ricardo watched everything with an amused expression. After Katie finally left with Enzo still chattering excitedly about coffee options, he practically ran back to the apartment looking for Ricardo. He found my husband in the office, and the words came out in an excited rush. Boss, boss, she agreed to have coffee with me. Nella's beautiful friend said yes. Enzo was practically vibrating with excitement. I'm going to have a date, a real date. This is amazing. Ricardo looked up from his work with an indulgent smile. Congratulations, Enzo. I'm happy for you. Then he made a dismissive gesture with his hand. Now get out. I'm busy here. I watched from where I was leaning against the doorframe as Enzo practically floated out of the office, still muttering to himself about coffee and dates. When he finally left, Ricardo looked up and found me watching, and the smile he gave me was purely possessive. Come here, he ordered softly, pushing the chair back and patting his lap in clear invitation. I walked over to him and settled onto his lap, feeling his strong arms wrap around me immediately. You were good with Enzo, I commented, running my fingers through his hair, letting him get all excited about the date without making jokes or teasing him. Enzo is loyal and deserves happiness, Ricardo replied simply, his hand tracing lazy patterns on my back. And maybe your friend will be good for him. God knows he needs someone to keep him in line. He paused, pulling me closer. But enough about Enzo. I've been busy thinking about you all day. About how beautiful you looked fighting. About how your body moves. About how much I want you. My heart raced at the words, and the promise in his dark eyes. Is that so? Yes. Then he kissed me, deep and slow and full of promises of what would come after. And as I surrendered to the kiss and the heat of his body, I wondered how I'd gotten so lucky to find someone who accepted me completely, dangers and madness included. Life with Ricardo would be many things, but it would never be boring. And sitting there on his lap while the outside world kept spinning with all its dangers and uncertainties, I decided I was completely okay with that. Chapter 8. Benedetti, Threat and Protection.
I've waited a long time to do this.
I was working in the office when I heard the door open and Ricardo enter with heavy steps that immediately put me on alert. I knew his sounds now, knew the difference between when he was calm and when something was very wrong. Those steps definitely indicated serious trouble. I came out to find him standing in the living room holding a plain white envelope, but the expression on his face was anything but plain. Fury was stamped on every line of his tense body. His eyes darkened to almost black, and his jaw so tight I could see the muscles jumping. I'd never seen him this furious, not even when Julia had shown up. Ricardo? What happened? What's that letter? My voice came out hesitant as I approached carefully, as if dealing with a dangerous animal about to attack. He looked at me, and the fury in his eyes made me stop mid-step. When he spoke, his voice came out cold and controlled in a way more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. Benedetti. The rival family I mentioned. They found out about you and they're making threats. My stomach sank. because I knew enough now about his world to understand exactly how dangerous that situation was. What kind of threats? Ricardo read from the letter, his voice flat and deadly. Your American wife, vulnerable, beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to her. He crumpled the paper, his knuckles turning white with the force. They're threatening me through you, using you as a weapon against me. And this is war. Fear ran down my spine like melted ice, but I tried to keep my voice steady. What do we do now? You stay here in the apartment with full security 24 hours a day, he said, walking over to me and holding my shoulders firmly. Enzo, Luca, Marco, and 6 more men will be on guard at all times. No one comes in or out without going through them first. And I deal with Benedetti. Real panic hit me, because this was much more real than anything we'd faced so far. Alone? You can't go alone to face an entire family. His expression softened marginally when he saw the genuine fear on my face, his hands coming up to hold my face with a gentleness that contrasted with the fury still burning in his eyes. Not alone, amore, with 10 of my best men, all trained and loyal, and ready to do what's necessary. His thumb traced my cheek. Nella, I won't let anything hurt you. Absolutely nothing. Understood? Tears began to burn because this was too much. Too real and scary. I know you want to protect me, but I'm scared. Very scared for you. Ricardo seemed genuinely surprised, as if the idea of someone worrying about him was strange. For me? Nella, I'm Dawn. I know how to take care of myself in dangerous situations. I've done it hundreds of times. Yes, for you. The tears finally fell as all the emotion overflowed. You could get hurt. You could die. And I love you, you idiot. I love you so much it hurts. And I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you. The world seemed to stop completely in that moment. Ricardo going still with genuine shock as he processed the words I'd just said for the first time. You love me. A wet laugh escaped through the tears. Yes, I love you. My lying and irritating mafia boss who put me in this impossible situation. But I love you anyway, even knowing it's crazy, even knowing all the dangers. The transformation on his face was beautiful to see. All the fury melting away and being replaced by something so deep and vulnerable, it made my heart ache. Then he pulled me in and kissed me with a desperate intensity that stole all the air from my lungs. It wasn't a soft kiss, but desperate and possessive, and loaded with all the emotion neither of us could express in words. When we finally separated, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against mine. I love you too, more than anything in this world. More than power or family or my own life. And that's exactly why I need to do this. I need to protect you always. I knew I couldn't stop him, that this was part of who he was. Stay safe, please, and come back soon. Promise you'll come back soon. I promise. I always come back to you. Nothing in this world would stop me from coming back to you. The following hours were agonizing as Enzo arrived with other armed men who transformed my apartment into a fortress. I watched Ricardo prepare in silence, changing into a dark suit and bulletproof vest that made my stomach churn, checking his gun with practiced movements that reminded me this was genuine and deadly danger. Before leaving, he came to me one last time, pulling me against his body and holding me as if he wanted to memorize exactly how I felt in his arms. I love you. Remember that while I'm gone, everything I do is for you. Come back alive. I always come back. To you. Always to you. He kissed me one last time, deep and desperate, and then he left. The hours that followed were the longest of my life, pacing through the apartment like a caged animal, unable to do anything but obsessively check my phone waiting for news. When I finally received the message, a short text that said, "It's handled, coming home, I love you," the relief was so intense my legs almost gave out. When Ricardo finally returned, I could see the exhaustion, but also the satisfaction of a mission accomplished, and there was a cut on his arm with blood staining his shirt. "You're hurt!" The words came out like an accusation as I ran to him. "It's just a scratch, Nella, it's fine, I promise it's nothing serious." But I was already pushing him toward the bathroom, determined to take care of the wound. I cleaned the cut with slightly trembling hands, being extra careful as I applied the bandage. "You fought for me. You went there, and fought with dangerous people because they threatened me." Ricardo grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. "I always fight for you. I'll always fight against anything that threatens you, because you're mine, Nella, my wife, my heart, my everything, and I protect what's mine with every drop of blood in my body." The tears came back, this time from relief and love. "What happened with Benedetti?" "We had a very clear conversation," he replied, his voice cold. "I explained that if they touched you, if they even thought about hurting you, I would destroy everything they love. Family, business, every person and everything that has value to them. And they agreed? Backed down completely, said the war isn't worth one American." He pulled me onto his lap, but I made it very clear that you're worth everything to me, that I'd burn the entire world to keep you safe. I rested my head on his shoulder, exhausted from all the tension and fear. Peace then? For now? For now. But I'm increasing security anyway. I don't completely trust them, and I won't risk your life. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. The danger had passed for now, but we both knew this was just the first of many, because this was the reality of loving a Dawn. But as I remained in his arms, feeling his heart beat strong against my ear, I decided I didn't care, that I'd face 1,000 dangers if it meant having one more day with him, one more moment of this impossible connection we shared, because love would always be worth the risk, and I loved him more than I feared the consequences. I think that's what true love is, right? That definition Nella gave, that love overcomes the risks. Chapter 9, Intensification and Real Wedding.
Forever with you.
Forever.
I was still sitting on Ricardo's lap in the bathroom, my fingers gently tracing around the bandage I'd just applied to his injured arm. The apartment was quiet now, except for the guards Enzo had left positioned at strategic points, transforming our home into a fortress that constantly reminded me of the dangers surrounding our life. Ricardo watched my face with that familiar intensity, his dark eyes studying every expression as if trying to memorize every detail. When he spoke, his voice came out low and husky in a way that made my stomach tighten. You took care of me, cleaned my wound so gently as if I were something precious and fragile. You are precious, I replied without thinking, the words coming out honest and raw. To me, you fought for me today, faced dangerous people because they threatened me, and came back injured. My voice trembled slightly. So yes, I'm going to take care of you with all the gentleness you deserve. Something passed through his eyes, something deep and vulnerable. He rarely let show. Then he pulled me even closer, eliminating any space between our bodies, his hands gripping my waist with possessive firmness. You're mine, Nella, my wife, my heart, my everything, and I'll always fight for you. I'll always protect what's mine. The words should have made me feel like property, should have irritated me with the obvious possessiveness, but instead they only made my heart race with the intensity of his declaration. Our marriage, I began slowly, choosing my words carefully, started as something fake, just a contract of convenience to solve our problems. But now it's the most real thing in my life. Ricardo didn't hesitate in his answer, the absolute conviction in his voice. More real than anything I've ever had, more important than empire or power or anything else I thought mattered. His hands came up to hold my face, forcing me to meet that intense gaze. And Nella, I want to renew our vows. My heart jumped in my chest at those words. Renew vows? But we just got married a few weeks ago. Not at the cold, bureaucratic courthouse where we exchanged empty words in front of a bored judge, he said, the intensity growing. I want to do it again, but for real this time, in a church with my family present, with meaning and weight and everything a wedding should be. He paused, his thumb tracing my cheek. I want the whole world to know that you're mine, and I'm yours, not by contract or convenience, but by real choice and true love. Will you do this with me? The tears began to fall before I could stop them, but this time they were tears of pure and overwhelming happiness. Yes, I managed to say through the crying, my voice broken with emotion. Always yes, 1,000 times yes. The smile he gave me was devastating in its genuine beauty, completely transforming his face from dangerous to absolutely stunning. Then he pulled me into a kiss that was everything the previous ones weren't, loaded with promise and commitment and love so deep it made my entire world tremble on its axis. I responded with everything I had, my arms wrapping around his neck as I surrendered completely to the kiss and the moment, and the man who held my heart in his hands. When we finally separated, both breathing heavily, Ricardo rested his forehead against mine for a long moment. I love you, he whispered, the words simple but loaded with weight and truth. More than words can express, more than actions can show, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to prove it to you every day. I love you too, I replied with the same intensity, my voice firm despite the tears still falling. Even with all the dangers and the madness and the fear, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. Ricardo stood in one fluid movement, carrying me with him as if I weighed nothing. We walked through the apartment, passing the guards who discreetly looked away, and he took me straight to his bedroom. Not the guest room where he'd been sleeping, but the master suite that was technically mine. No more separate rooms, he declared, as he gently set me down beside the huge bed. You sleep here with me starting tonight. Every night, forever. I should protest, remind him about the contract and the rules we'd established. But those rules were made when this was just business, and now it was so much more. Possessive, I commented, but there was no real censure in my voice. Completely possessive, he agreed, without any trace of shame or regret, his voice dropping to a low growl that made my entire skin tingle with anticipation. His hands found my waist, pulling me against his body. "And you, Nella, you're mine, completely and absolutely mine. Forever, forever," I repeated, the words coming out as both promise and surrender. "I'm yours, and you're mine, and nothing will change that." His mouth found mine again, but this time the kiss was different, slower, but somehow more intense, loaded with the promise of what was to come. His hands moved down my back, exploring through the thin fabric of my clothes, and I felt my entire body respond to his touch in ways I'd never experienced before. When he gently guided me toward the bed, there was no nervousness or hesitation, just absolute certainty that this was right and inevitable. We lost ourselves in each other as night enveloped the apartment, exchanging touches and whispers and promises in the dark, sealing our commitment in ways that went beyond words or contracts. The intimacy between us was everything it should be, gentle but intense, careful but passionate, Ricardo treating me as if I were infinitely precious, while also showing me the depth of his desire. Each touch was reverence, each kiss was promise, each moment was confirmation that what we shared was real and deep, and worth all the risks. Afterward, lying tangled in the messy sheets, my head resting on his chest as I listened to the steady beating of his heart, I felt a peace I didn't know was possible. His hands traced lazy patterns on my back, and I could feel the contentment emanating from him in almost palpable waves. "I don't regret anything," I said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Not the insane agreement, not the initial lies, not the dangers, because everything led to this. To us, and I wouldn't trade this for anything. Ricardo pulled me even closer, kissing my hair with a tenderness that contrasted with the fierce possessiveness I knew from him. "Me neither, amore mio, me neither. You transformed my life from obligation and power into something with real meaning." His voice was hoarse with emotion. "You made me feel again, made me want to be a better man, gave me reason to fight for a future, instead of just surviving the present." I lifted my head to look at his face, seeing the vulnerability and love reflected in his dark eyes. "We're going to make it work, right? Despite all the obstacles and dangers still to come, we're going to do more than make it work," he promised with absolute conviction. "We're going to build a life together, a family together, a future together. And anything or anyone who tries to separate us will have to go through my dead body first." I smiled at the dramatic declaration that was so typically him. "I hope it doesn't come to that, but I understand the feeling." I paused, my own voice becoming serious. "I would fight for you too, for us, with everything I have." "I know, my fierce warrior," he said with obvious pride, pulling me back into the warmth of his body. "Now sleep. Tomorrow we start planning the real vow renewal, but today we've had enough excitement." I closed my eyes, letting the emotional and physical exhaustion finally catch up with me. But before falling completely asleep, I whispered one last promise into the darkness. "I love you, my impossible dawn. I love you too, my perfect wife," he replied. And those were the last words I heard before drifting into the deepest and most peaceful sleep I'd had in weeks, safe in the arms of the man I loved more than life itself. Chapter 10. Vow, Renewal, and Ending. I choose you. 3 months had passed since that night that changed everything. 3 months of building a real life together without lies or secrets between us. And now I was standing in front of a huge mirror in Sicily, looking at my reflection in the wedding dress Ricardo had insisted on buying. Pure white and lacy and infinitely more beautiful than the simple dress I wore at the courthouse. Katie was beside me adjusting the veil, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You look absolutely stunning, Nella. Ricardo's going to have a heart attack when he sees you walking down that aisle." The church Ricardo had chosen wasn't the small chapel I expected, but rather the Cathedral of Montreal, a Byzantine masterpiece with golden mosaics covering every inch of the walls and ceiling, creating an atmosphere that literally took your breath away. It was grand and stunning, but Ricardo had made sure only immediate family and closest friends were present, transforming the huge space into something intimately ours. "I'm ready," I said, more to myself than to Katie. "I'm really ready for this." The enormous cathedral doors opened and the music began to play, echoing off the ancient walls with a reverence that made my heart ache. I walked down the aisle alone because my father was no longer here. But at the end, something much better than the past awaited me. The future awaited me in the form of Ricardo. He was standing at the altar in an impeccable suit, but it was the expression on his face that made me stumble slightly over my own feet. Complete admiration and love so intense it shone in his dark eyes, visible even from a distance. Around him was the entire Gagliardi family, serious and dangerous men who knew the truth about who he was, but all smiling as they watched me walk toward their man. When I finally reached the altar, Ricardo took my hands in his, and I could feel the slight tremor in them, the only indication that he was as affected as I was by this moment. The priest began the ceremony in Italian first, and then in English for my benefit, the words echoing through the magnificent cathedral. But it was when it came time for personal vows that everything became real, in a way the courthouse never was. The priest nodded for Ricardo to begin, and he cleared his throat, his voice coming out firm, but loaded with emotion he rarely let others see. Nella, you entered my life by pure chance, a business agreement that was supposed to be simple and uncomplicated, but you became everything. You made me feel again when I thought I was dead inside. You gave me reason to fight for a future instead of just surviving the present. You taught me that love is worth any risk, any danger, any sacrifice. His hand squeezed mine. I promise to protect you with every breath in my body, to love you with every beat of my heart, to honor you as you deserve to be honored. You are my queen, my light in the darkness, my reason to be a better man. And I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice by staying. Tears were flowing freely down my face now, and I didn't even try to stop them. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and let my heart speak through the words. Ricardo, you were a stranger who accepted an insane proposal from a desperate woman in a Manhattan cafe, but you became my everything, my husband, my protector, my best friend, the love of my life. My voice trembled, but I continued. I promise to love you through all the dangers your world brings, to challenge you when you need to be challenged, to stand by your side no matter what comes. You showed me that real love is worth any risk, and I choose you. I choose us. I choose this crazy and dangerous and absolutely perfect life we built together. Mafia and all. The smile Ricardo gave me was through his own tears shining in his eyes, and I'd never seen him so vulnerable and open. The priest declared us husband and wife again, but this time with real weight and true meaning. You may kiss the bride. Ricardo didn't hesitate, pulling me against him and kissing me with a passion that didn't care about the audience or the sacred location, just expressing everything he felt in a way words never could. I responded with the same intensity, and when we finally separated, the entire cathedral echoed with applause and shouts of approval from his family. The boss is really happy. I heard Enzo shout dramatically from somewhere, and when I looked, he was openly crying with Katie beside him holding his hand and rolling her eyes with obvious affection. To my complete surprise, I saw my grandmother Margaret sitting in the front rows, smiling with satisfaction as if she'd planned everything from the beginning. Ricardo must have brought her as a surprise, and the gesture made my heart overflow even more with love for him. The reception was at the Gagliardi family villa, intimate but beautiful, full of authentic Italian food and wine that flowed freely. Margaret approached us during the party, her sharp eyes studying Ricardo with approval she hadn't given completely before. You make her happy and protect her. Much better than an olive oil importer, she said with a knowing smile. Officially approved now, and you can call me Nonna. Your real family, Ricardo laughed, kissing her hand with genuine respect. Thank you, Nonna. I'll take care of her until my last breath. When the sun began to set over the Sicilian landscape, Ricardo led me to the villa's private balcony, away from the party, but still able to hear the music and laughter. He pulled me against his chest, and we just stood there, watching the colors of the sky change from gold to pink to deep purple. So we started with "I need a husband by tomorrow," I commented, snuggling closer to his warmth. And now you have a husband forever, he replied, his voice hoarse with emotion and satisfaction. Mafia Don, fierce protector, and a man completely and irrevocably in love with you. And I have a completely crazy life, I laughed softly. Sicilian Mafia, constant dangers, clumsy Enzo, occasional crazy exes, but all with you. And you love it, he teased. I love you. My perfect queen. He kissed me again as the sun disappeared completely, sealing promises that would last far beyond that perfect night. From inside the villa, we heard Enzo shout dramatically, "Boss! Katie agreed to date me seriously. We're getting married too." We laughed together, the sound mixing with the music and the voices of family celebrating. Our life would be many things, dangerous and unpredictable and absolutely crazy, but it would be ours, built on real love and conscious choices and true commitment. And as I stood in the arms of the man I loved more than life itself, watching the stars begin to appear in the Sicilian sky, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. And now I'm going to reveal some fun facts you didn't notice. Or did you? The coffee Nella spilled at the first meeting fell on the floor, not on Ricardo. He escaped the accident that changed both their lives unscathed. Enzo almost gave Ricardo away twice in the same day, calling him boss at the courthouse, and almost Don when he arrived in the SUV. Ricardo's apartment, 4,000 square feet, is exactly 6.6 times bigger than Nella's, 600 square feet. Not the 7 times she emotionally estimated. Margaret lived in Italy in the 60s, and knew Sicilian accents perfectly. She knew the truth about Ricardo from dinner. The only condition Nella added to the original contract, no big lies, was the first one Ricardo broke. Enzo calls himself cute Mafia, and genuinely believes this category exists. Ricardo wore a bulletproof vest to confront Benedetti, but still came back with a cut on his arm that needed to be bandaged by Nella. Nella had exactly 72 hours to get married when she met Ricardo at the cafe. She was turning 29 in 3 days and would lose the $5 million inheritance. And if you want to check out another love story with multiple twists, click on the video that appears on your screen now.